And so that's why when I reference what I wrote about, one man gave me life, but an army of men made me a man. It's because although that hole was there from my dad, I didn't feel it as much.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Badass Dad podcast, where we are a band of brothers committed to forging stronger fathers. Hey, get connected with us. You can go to our website, new and updated website, BadAssDads.org. That is BadAssDads.org. Hey, sign up for our email list where you'll be getting the most up-to-date content and some behind-the-scenes things as well as exclusive content. Follow us on Instagram at Badass Dads Podcast. You can also do me a favor. My one ask for you is subscribe and write a review and rate this podcast. Give us 5 stars, leave us a review. We're going to be sending out some swag, some t-shirts and things to people who leave a review for us. So please do that and follow us on all those different forms. Have a badass day. Welcome to the Badass Dad podcast. KDH here on the microphone in the Iron Yeti studios. Man, super excited about today. Man, Josh Miller here on the microphone. Josh, we have known each other for more than a decade and a half. That's amazing.
It's been a long time.
It has been a long time. And man, been able to walk a lot of life together. We've been business partners. Really, that's how we started. We started off as business partners working together. And, we've seen so much transition. You're one of the very few people that have been in our life this long that knew us prior to having kids, before we adopted the boys, which I know is kind of fun. This last week was our gotcha day for our oldest son, Jacob. So 9 years ago, mid-July, was when we got him, and so it was so much fun. And so we went out. The 5 of us went out and had a little dinner at Papado's. Give Papado's a little shout out. So It was good.
Love it.
But man, let's spend a little time on the microphone. I mean, there's so much going on in your world, around your world, and I'm not talking about the riots, which all that kind of crazy stuff. I'm not talking about COVID. I'm talking about your world as far as relationships and everything. And so we're gonna jump into that for sure, and just the different world that you have now. Almost a year into dating not just dating, but a single mom and some of those things, and stepping both feet into the deep end. With some of those relationships as well. So, but let's do this before we jump into those topics that we want to talk about. Tell us about little Joshua growing up and in the epicenter of the riot in Minneapolis, where it all starts. Who would have known Armageddon would have started in Minneapolis?
No kidding. Yeah. It's interesting because I was listening to an interview. Well, it wasn't even an interview. It was I guess it was a hearing of some sort there in Minneapolis yesterday. It was a live broadcast, and it happened to pop up on social media, and I listened to it on a run, and it's hard. It's hard to not get emotional when it's the place you grew up. And I mean, they're talking about defunding the police. Part of the interview was having one of the top, I think she's a sergeant within the Minneapolis Police Department. And she had a guy that's been on the police force for 6 years basically say, every day I want to kill myself. And he goes, I love what I do. And it was a dream to become a police officer. And so to see the emotion, and for him to go, I don't have a pension, I'm not vested, but what should I do? And then for her to have to turn around and say, honestly, I think you should pursue another career path. It's better for you to do that, because she knows that he doesn't have the tenor there, and he's not vested. And so there's other options there for him. And so for me, just listening to that, it's incredibly emotional. But grew up. There's so many things that I'd love to say just from listening to the podcast with Darius and some of the things that I experienced as a kid, and whatnot. But those are a lot of tangents. But really grew up in a single parent home. My mom did the best that she could with what she had. My grandparents stepped in quite a bit. The summers were spent for the most part at their home, kind of the tail end of elementary school through junior high, and then the first year of high school. I spent a lot of time at my grandparents' house. Then that transitioned over to my uncle, did a lot of work for him. And so really my only 2 real male role models when I was younger was my uncle and my grandfather. And Dad checked out when I was 2, and so I never really had much of a relationship with him. And so that just about and all relationship with him was me pursuing him. So there's a lot of lessons there, and a lot of things that I've had to figure out and overcome. And I'll reference this at some point, but a couple Father's Days ago, I wrote something about what that looked like. Not really having a father, but always wanting to be a dad. But yeah, going back to my mom, single mom, it was pretty rough. She didn't make a lot of money. And so we just had to piece together what that looked like. And, we didn't move around a ton, but we moved around enough that until I got into junior high and high school, there was no real stability. So I know we share a little bit of that in our story. And so I didn't have to ask for it, though. I don't know if my mom recognized it or she just got sick of moving around, but we basically lived in one neighborhood from the time 6th grade happened until I graduated from high school. So, but yeah, grew up there, left Minnesota at the prompting of, it was a youth pastor / leader, and then a good friend of mine, her mom, who was almost like a second mother to me, very healthy woman. Both of them encouraged me to get as far away from my mom as I could to figure out who I was, independent of her, as well as just learning who I was in and of itself. So in a nutshell, that's what.
Where did you go?
Moved to Texas, moved to the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Yeah. Came to God's country.
Which to some might be another circle of hell when it comes to the heat. It's God's country in the wintertime for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah. The guy that, his name is Craig Kessner. So Craig may listen to this at some point. We reconnected after almost 25 years.
Wow.
About a month and a half ago, and spent about an hour and a half.
That just means you're old. When you say like 25 years,
it's kind of weird
really
to say
old.
that. Yeah. So he really encouraged me to go to a small Bible school of all things called Christ for the Nations. And before that, I was planning to go to pre-med and ultimately become a physical therapist.
Yeah.
And totally went another direction and became essentially a youth pastor of sorts.
Yeah.
And so worked in youth, really youth work for the better part of a decade. Always had one foot there and one foot in the restaurant industry. And so laid a good foundation for business today.
Yeah.
To not just recognize serving people, but also connecting with them at a really deep level. So a lot of things brought about the role that I have in the world today. And so I was in Dallas for 10 years, did youth work the majority of that time, did a 1-year stint with a buddy of mine doing construction after Hurricane Katrina, and knew I wanted to make a change, didn't know what it was going to look like. A guy that was a couple years older than me encouraged me to move here to Colorado, in all honesty, to chase a girl.
Okay. Yep.
And we had known each other for a long time. And so there was a little bit of a question mark there. And after 3 months, we figured out that wasn't going to happen. But in a nutshell, that's Minnesota to Dallas and Dallas to Colorado.
There you go. Well, one of the things that has always fascinated me, you have had an amazing ability to get really close to some great leaders. All the way going back to, I don't know about high school, but definitely, from college and moving on from there. Your relationship with Tom Davis early on, you go to, I think Nashville is when you meet Mansfield, right? Is it right?
Yep.
So maybe give us like a little nugget. What was it about like Tom that you got from him? Because when I look at it, some big leaders that I know about in your life, Tom Davis, Stephen Mansfield, Mark Marchesani, Bill Arender. You've got some of the who's who in really leadership throughout the world, and you get a chance to be close to them. And so how is that? Tom's good. He's a good friend of yours. I know Tom in Spain, but, tell us a little something that you've got or you admire from him.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because we had a really close relationship for just shy of 4 years.
Wow.
So that was during youth days. So how we met, was a little bit serendipitous. A good friend of mine had heard a vision that I had to essentially start a program in the Minneapolis area. So the University of Minnesota has 2 campuses, one in Minneapolis, one in St. Paul, and there's a bus line that is a university bus line that essentially bisects that area. And I had a vision to start something that would specifically serve students, both high school as well as college students. And after hearing that vision, he goes, "Hey, I know a group of people that are doing something very similar to that at Hillcrest, which is a church in North Dallas. I don't think it even exists anymore, but he introduced me to them, and then it was kind of an orbit and I got pulled into the orbit, and there was a lot of things that were going on there, not just with high school, but junior high. And so got inside that orbit. So that's really how we met, was just through an introduction. But very quickly, not only Tom, but his wife, Emily, Emily is, I'll probably get a little emotional throughout this, just because there's the depth of relationships. And Emily was, I never had a big sister or big brother, but to have somebody like Emily in my life, her story is probably one of the most insane stories I've ever heard. Her family, specifically her grandfather, was on America's Most Wanted because of a manifesto that he wrote, and it's open knowledge, so it's okay to talk about. But because of the absolutely crazy story that they have, and the tremendous amount of counseling that they went through, maybe in some respects she became a little bit of an older sister / counselor for me. And so she talked me through a lot of the things that I had to process with my mom, and the damage from abuse, and a lot of things that I experienced as a kid. And so we spent hours and hours, weeks and months collectively over the course of that 3 or 4 year period. And then that's obviously outside of what we actually did working with students. And so by virtue of that relationship, there was a lot of just proximity to those two. And I would say, because they are a couple, Emily had as much of an impact as Tom did. The thing that I love about Tom is a connector. He's probably one of the greatest connectors I've ever met in my life.
Yeah.
I've always thought, if I wanted to meet somebody, Tom probably knows them indirectly,
or
one way
directly.
or another, or directly. Yeah. And, I can say this through the mic. Tom will probably hear this at some point.
Yeah.
And so I can say without question, thank you.
Yeah.
Not only for the role that you played as a friend and a brother, but also as, being a couple years older, as a mentor.
Yeah.
But to really answer the question about Tom, I saw somebody who could take a big idea and unpack that, and his ability to lead people and inspire people and motivate people. He's probably one of the best I've ever seen. And I saw that play out not just with what we were doing with students in terms of attracting really great people to what we were doing, but also internationally. He ultimately became the president of an organization, a nonprofit in Colorado Springs. But that started long before that, when we were going to Russia. We had taken a number of trips to Russia and worked with orphans there.
Yeah.
And so, kids have always been, close to my heart. Even the idea of becoming a physical therapist, the idea was to catch kids when they were going through one of the most difficult times of their life and really walk with them through that. And so there was never a desire to work with adults as a physical therapist. So that's always been a little bit of the fabric of who I am. So, but in a nutshell, both Tom and Emily, it really walked me through that transition into who I am today.
Love that.
At a early season, that developed a lot over the following years. But
yeah, well, you kind of brought it up a couple of times. And I'm going to steal Tom's book title, which I believe I'm going to get it right, which was Fields of the Fatherless.
Yeah. And,
really so similar to my story, grew up really not knowing your dad at all. talk to me a little bit about how that was for you, and then when you really made, because you said all of the communication was, you initiated. So, and I'm gonna share a little bit of personal story that's going on in our family right now, and how this is how will apply as well. But talk to us a little bit about that. Just growing up without a dad, a little bit what's that like, and then when you're making that initiation to communicate with them, and how that's affected you.
Yeah. So I think there's a number of different things. I mean, there's obviously a hole there. And so when I think through what that looked like in my younger years, there was always just a gap.
Mm-hmm.
There was questions. I knew he was out there. His parents lived in the Minneapolis area. And so there was definitely a knowledge of who he was.
Did you have a relationship with them?
I wouldn't say yet. No.
Okay.
I mean, I knew who they were.
Okay.
There was a couple of interactions over the years, but from the time that I was born until I reached out to my dad, that might equate in 16 years to one, possibly two times.
So you weren't doing holidays together. You weren't
Nothing.
Hanging out, spending weekends at grandma and grandpa's house or anything like that.
No,
Okay.
It was all on my mom's side.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So the gap that a father leaves when he's not present is substantial.
Mm-hmm.
I think most people know this, but our identity, even for women, their identity comes from their father. Their femininity comes from their mother. But for guys, I think that hole is magnified. And so for me, fortunately, I look back and I don't really recall this pre-junior high, but I remember junior high through high school. Very distinctly, I remember Paul Carroll. I remember Mike Spencer. I remember a couple years later, a guy named Todd Riggs. And I say their names, especially Todd, just because he started a thing called the Band of Brothers years ago. I mean, he saw me in this group of knuckleheads. I just graduated from high school, but I was still a part of the youth program. And he basically pulled me out of this group and said, I'm gonna walk with you.
Yeah.
And so for a number of years, we walked very closely together. And he's got some fun stories that are probably not humiliating, but they're, it's dirt.
Yeah.
So anyway, all that being said, he and many others really started to fill that gap. And so that's why when I reference what I wrote about, one man gave me life, but an army of men made me a man. It's because although that hole was there from my dad, I didn't feel it as much. And this would be, a shameless plug for the church. I mean, there's a lot of damage the church has done over the years, but the one thing that, at least for me, my mom, she had a lot of gaping holes as a parent, but the one thing she made sure is that we showed up to church. And so as a result, there were a lot of men that saw that hole, and whether they meant to or not, they filled that gap that my father was not able to and did not.
Yeah.
So I would say that in the shortest answer.
Yeah. Well, it is very interesting, and I don't even think we've told you this. So this is breaking news a little bit, but this is a very intimate area, and I just had the conversation with Jacob. So Jacob's biological parents, we have not really kept in contact with over the years. Partly that was just self-preservation for us, and some other things that we wanted to be careful with. And now that Jacob's 13 years old, we've always been open. One of the things that he has been greatly appreciative of, even as he's had conversations with other people that he knows that have been adopted, he's appreciated the way that we've gone about it in our communication. And so he wanted to make sure that they were okay and that they knew that he was okay. And so we had reached out to some people to make some contact. And so we just found out here in the last couple of weeks that Jacob's biological mother had passed away. And so, of the two of them, Jacob had much closer relationship with his father, even though he was bouncing in and out of the system quite a bit, but it was still emotional. It was still a conversation. And, I kind of went back to, my conversation a few episodes ago with Chumba and just having a difficult conversation with my son. And so this last Saturday, we had gone and we had a football practice. We out doing some stuff, and then we went and had breakfast. And during breakfast, I was like, "Hey, I need to tell you." And but he is very connected to his emotions. Okay. Yeah. He is not a calloused kid. He is incredibly empathetic. He has emotional intelligence off the chart. But it was something that I told him, I do not want to hide it from him. My story. I was basically Jacob's age, and up until Jacob's age, I'd been told that my biological father had died, and then all of a sudden here I am, going, what the hell? Not only is he not dead, but he lives here in the same town that I'm growing up in Dallas, and that just caused me to have different emotions in the way I acted out in my early, most of my teen years. But I just say all that to go, it is, you talked about the power and the role that the father plays. Well, let's get to the meat of it. You're now in a relationship.
Yeah.
And it is progressing to more permanency.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can we say it? I mean, it's not breaking news yet because it's not official.
Yeah, it's not official.
Okay. But y'all have talked.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you have been, dating a single mom who has two gorgeous kids who are 6 and 9 years old, yep. Right? And so all of a sudden, all of the pain, frustration, excitement, romanticizing what it's going to be like to be a dad, I mean, all of those things are coming up in your world, and you are now really for the first time, although you've definitely been close enough to Gretchen and I, like I said, you know us before, you've been, walking with us, the entire last 9 years for sure, because you've known us for 15. You've been an intimate part of our life. We've done holidays together forever.
Yeah.
And every single one with our boys. But now all of a sudden, you're now kind of looking and going, wow, I mean, I want to be dad now. This is becoming a reality.
Yeah.
Talk to me about how that just feels, like just having that consciousness.
Yeah.
Right now.
It's humbling.
Yeah.
To say the least. I mean, thankfully you guys have navigated that, at least from the outside looking in, overall really, really well. And you guys have been super intentional. So between, a number of other parents that I've watched, really good parents and not so good parents, mm-hmm. And their example, it's given me a lot to know what to and what not to do. I think the Band of Brothers and being a part of that for the last, 7 or 8 years, that's given me a really healthy look into what these little guys need and how important it is for me to lead them. And so, where I feel like from the outside, I would have a lot more questions to ask. At this point, the questions that I ask are fine-tuning questions, because between you and Gretchen and Mark and Kathy and, even Todd and Cheryl, who I mentioned earlier, I've got so many wonderful, wonderful men and women that have been such a great example. I remember early on when Crystal and I first started dating, she and I had a conversation with some intensity. And I just remember thinking, gosh, she's just like Gretchen. She's the Velvet Hammer. And, with
be careful
Grace,
what you ask for.
Yeah, right. I'd rather have the Velvet Hammer than just the hammer.
Yeah, that's true.
But I tell you what, I mean, she's brilliant. She's smart. She's gorgeous. And she really is, she's a good mom. And I think, as I've started down this path, I knew, having been married, gone through a divorce, and the older you get, the greater the chance that you're going to marry somebody with kids. And my good friend Jason, we were going for a hike one day, and he goes, "So are you open to an Insta family?" And he said it so fast, I didn't even process it. I was like, what? And then it hit me, and I'm like, yeah, I totally am open to that.
Yeah.
and for a lot of reasons. I mean, obviously there's so many guys out there that are they're just shitty human beings.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm not even going to mince words on that. There's a lot of dads that are checked out. My dad, he didn't have the framework for whatever reason. He's a good man. If anybody met him, they would love him. He's a wonderful man, but he doesn't have the framework for family.
Mhm.
And I don't know if I've never really been able to unpack that with him. I would love to, but it's a sensitive subject, and that's obvious in how he's responded to other conversations. But going back to Crystal, as we've developed our relationship, I've been proactive in the conversations I've had with her. I mean, from the get-go, I said, hey, I understand. And we've been doing the long distance thing. She's back in Dallas. We had met when we went to the same church more than 15 years ago, much longer than 15 years because I've been here 15 years. And so I told her, I'm going to be the one that has probably going to be flying to you and coming to you more than I expect you to come to me. And so really laying that foundation, I told her up front, I said, I don't want to meet your kids for a while. I want to make sure that we protect their hearts. And I think all too often men are not conscious of that. They're not aware of the kids. I mean, they're letting their emotions and they're letting their sexual drive drive the relationship
Mhm.
rather than being aware and careful of not only her heart, but of the kid's heart. And some of that is just a reflection of watching my mom go through a number of relationships when I was younger. The guy that put me through gun training, the guy that took me deer hunting for the first time, the guy that took me pheasant hunting for the first time, the guy that taught me how to drive a truck, a tractor, and an ATV. That was the one relationship kind of as junior high ended and high school began that ended up falling apart. And, the guy actually has tracked me down through social media and reached out to me. And, we had a good conversation and I asked him a few questions about it. And, I think both of them were probably broken. I think my mom more so than from Jerry's perspective. But I look at that and I look at those relationships and how those affected my sister and I.
Mhm.
I don't need to go through all the details, but I remember my sister telling me that she walked in on my mom with this guy and it just was, for a little girl, that's pretty traumatic,
Right. Sure.
And so even, how you spend your intimate moments with somebody, you got to be careful around kids. I remember I was probably 5 when I walked in on my mom, watching porn with her boyfriend. And to this day, I can point to some issues that I've faced in my life that go back to that very moment.
Wow.
And a lot of people, they, just brush porn under the rug. I'll be the first one to tell you, it destroys how men look at women, and it destroys how women feel. And there's so many other implications. But for me, I can point directly to that moment and some of the issues that I've faced, and indirect sexual abuse that I experienced as a result of that pornography. It's bizarre,
Yeah.
and it's not necessarily something we need to unpack here, but it's something that I don't think our culture understands the importance of protecting children in that way. And so
do you remember, because you didn't want to meet her 2 boys
yeah,
at the beginning. Do you remember the moment of the conversation you guys had when you go, you feel comfortable? Obviously, you're trying to figure out, does she feel comfortable enough to finally meet them? And then how that was like meeting them for the first. I mean, because even at that point, you'd made some decisions going, okay, for me to meet her, this has to be a pretty serious relationship.
Yeah.
And I know that it's going to be moving toward permanency.
Yeah.
i.e. marriage.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you're already having those thoughts in your mind. So as some level you're going, and I don't want to project on you because we've never talked about this, but I mean, I'm just thinking about when I met Jacob for the first time, I remember some of the emotions I had going, wow, I could be meeting my son for the first time. And, just how that feels.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I mean, it's emotional for me to hear that because I remember that day
Yeah.
when you took him to McDonald's.
Yeah.
And I just remember how emotional I got about that. So it's still, those little dudes, they're not my kids, but I feel as protective as any uncle would of his nephews. And so for me, there's definitely a lot of connection there. So I've definitely thought a lot about it. We started dating at the end of July of last year, and somewhere about halfway through July to September, so mid-August-ish, maybe late August, we started talking via Marco Polo. It was we both were on there, and she pinged me, and that was really where the relationship started to shift from just being very casual and talking to, hey, this might be going somewhere. Anytime you start a relationship, you're asking yourself, is this going to go somewhere?
Right.
But that's when things all of a sudden started shifting. And a lot of those conversations had the boys in the background. So they're seeing and hearing us talk. And her oldest he's an extrovert, to say the least. He wants to be in the middle of something. He feels like he's being left out if he's not a part of the conversation. So it's always fun. So he was oftentimes a part of that.
Yeah.
And so as a result, that was really the beginning of me starting to think through. And that was when we had that conversation about meeting the boys. Well, fast forward, and it's October when we actually do that. And I understand I'm not their father, even as a stepdad. I'm not their father, and their father is still involved in their life. And I don't really understand all of the implications of what that looks like behind the scenes, but I've had glimpses.
Yeah.
But I know that my role is to support him, and my role is to support her. And so stepping into that, I sent him a text message. We all knew each other from back in the day, and I didn't have his information anymore. So I got it from her and said, hey, I need to send him a text message and really just prepare him for this, this meeting, and let him know, hey, I have no intention of replacing you or your role in their lives. But, I do know that I'm going to have a role in their life. And so just out of respect for you, I just want to give you a heads up on that. And so, going back to your original question, I don't recall there being a huge, like this is a monumental conversation or monumental. It's more of, as I've gotten to know them and their personalities, I recognize how much of a role I have in their lives in terms of how they started to respond to her, how they communicate with her, how we interact, the role that I've begun to play in their life, since then. Going into it, there wasn't a huge shift. It wasn't like, I come home from work and my wife says, I'm pregnant.
Right.
That I didn't have that just because there's been such a long buildup.
So it was more of a fade into that relationship.
Yeah,
there.
for sure.
All right. So, we've heard many times, especially in our professional career, that the cleanliness of theory is no match for the mess of reality. And so you decided to take a little adventure and dive headlong into fatherhood and really testing this relationship. And what I mean by that is you flew from Colorado to Dallas and then loaded up the family and then drove back to Colorado to go camping. Spend some time camping. Even though it's the summertime, when you're on the side of, I think you're in Mount Princeton or something like that, it can still get a little chilly. And so it might not have been as prepared as possible. And then come back, meet some people, and then drive back. So, in a week's time period, you've spent quite a bit of windshield time with this family, seeing what it's like and finding out that it is for real, that they do say, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? And just, the reality of, camping. And it's one thing to take a youth group out, but it's another thing when you are dad, But talk to me a little bit about that. Oh, and then you had the Texas fireworks afterward, which really, we could spend a whole segment on how that stretched Crystal in so many different ways.
Yeah, that was good.
It was wonderful. It was. I had more fun watching her and just seeing the emotions that she was trying, to work through of letting her boys do it, and she did. I was so super proud of her. But talk to us about what was the theory that you had? Thinking, oh, you know what? We'll do a little road trip because you love to do road trips. You love to drive for hours. Okay, I'm like, if it's more than 2 hours, we're flying. But what was in the reality? So compare the theory of what you had going into it to the reality of what it was really like.
Yeah. Well, to her credit, she is a researcher like nobody's business. So she had, in the process of studying, so any moms that are listening to this and maybe dads that want to pass it on, she had studied how to road trip with kids and how to camp with kids and all this stuff.
That's so funny. That is so her. I mean, I don't even know Crystal that well, but I can already tell.
Oh
yes,
yeah.
She is. Yes.
Yeah. She didn't pack a suitcase. She had little bins. And so so instead of having to pull everything out and then put everything back, she had the bins all set out. So they each had a bin inside of their tent.
She probably had Ziploc bags with clothes put inside each bag that had the days that they're supposed to wear those clothes on each day.
Almost. It was packing cubes, but yes. and then she was like, hey, I need a laundry basket. So it wasn't a laundry basket. It was a laundry bag that ended up being larger than both of her kids combined by the end of the trip. So yeah, it was pretty funny. Thankfully it didn't spring a leak, but no, there were so many things. I mean, I think about, so we hit the road, I don't know, somewhere in West Texas. We stopped off to get gas and about 5 minutes outside of town, and we are in the middle of nowhere. And it's classic. We had the old cowboy driving the pickup truck that probably weighs 350 pounds, pull off, and the big, thick Southern drawl gets out. And I'm finishing up putting the tire on after we ran over a large nail. And it was one of those things where I was like, something just shifted in the car. And I think we're having a flat, and we never even hit the rim. I pulled over as quick as I could, and I'm not unmechanically inclined. I wouldn't put myself in the category of being a mechanic, but we very quickly changed the tire. She was surprised because she hadn't really seen that side of me before. She's like, what can I do to help? I'm like, honestly, just get back in the car and stay cool.
Yeah.
I'll have this done in a few minutes. And so got that done. And then the cowboy pulls up, and, I'm basically loading the car back up at that point. But it's just classic Texas. But so now we have to drive the last 100 miles to Amarillo going 50 miles an hour on
the
a
little
donut. Good God. I was like, there's a reason why they put large spare tires on good cars. And I'm grateful for those. Anyways, so that was the first real challenge, that we faced. And then as we're pulling into Amarillo, there's this insane storm, 80-mile-an-hour crosswinds, golf ball size hail. It's dark. It's torrential downpour. And I'm going, I don't want her van, which it's hard enough for me to drive, but all the more, so I'm going, where can we pull off? And there's literally, it's called the Cowboy Church. I've seen it a handful of times over the years. And I was like, I think it's coming up. And I pull off and I hide behind this church to avoid the wind and the hail, and the hail's bouncing over the van. It's just classic.
As you're telling the story, I'm thinking back to the original Vacation with Chevy Chase, back in the early 80s, and they're going to Wally World, and he's got all these big plans, and he bought the new car and all that kind of stuff, and he drives through St. Louis, and the hubcaps get stolen, and I mean, it's just this is the story that is unfolding in front of us right here.
Pretty much, yeah.
I mean, and we're not even 12 hours into the journey.
No. I think we're not even 6.
Okay.
Because it's 6 hours from Dallas to Amarillo. So yeah, assuming you're going 85.
Yeah.
So no, but it is. It's all the things, and really, I think because of how good she is. I mean, truly, she is a wonderful mom, and this is just one more example of it. I mean, she had a bag of all their snacks, and they got to choose how quickly or how slowly they wanted to eat it. Well, one eats like a mouse and the other one eats like he's a teenager and he's 6. So the reality is there was all that. And then she had, road bingo. And so they couldn't get on their devices until after they earned it, and then they only had 20 minutes on it. So there's all these things to keep them engaged. And so it's a lot of fun, of fun. Honestly, the trip itself really wasn't that bad. I'm a road warrior. So it really doesn't faze me a whole lot. The packing and the unpacking when we loaded 7.5 cubic feet of wood for our trip. And obviously, since I do some smoking, I go, hey, whatever we don't use, I'll just use for smoking meat. But that the real test came after the first night when they froze their asses off.
So you're at this point camping.
Yeah, we got up to Breckenridge.
How was it setting up the tent? Oh, that's y'all were Breckenridge, not okay.
Well, the Breckenridge Frisco area. We did go to Buena Vista on our way through back to Denver, but no, the setting up the tent, when you got a 6 and a 9-year-old, it's more like herding stray cats.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, grab a bag and take it down. And beyond that, like, you're lucky if you get that accomplished.
Mm-hmm.
And so, after time, I'll be able to groom that into them. Hey, you're here to help. You're a part of this.
Mm-hmm.
But initially it was really whatever I can get, I'm happy with. I set up the tent for the most part, had a little bit of help. We are setting it up in the dark. So for her, I'm fine with it, but for her, that was frustrating. And so, there's some lessons there. Some of that had to do with some of the stops that we made as we were pulling in, and just, a few more lessons in camping with a family versus camping as a person or as an individual.
Well, I'm laughing because, in theory, we go, it is so great. You want to teach your kids how to do this. You want to teach them how to set up the tent. And you want to, all those wonderful things. And yes. And then you have the reality of it's freaking cold. It's rainy, or it's this, or I'm hungry, or whatever. I just want to get the damn tent set up, and this is not the time for me to teach a lesson. And I'm thinking back through so many scenarios with myself because, as you know, I've been stretched a little bit. I'm not quite an outdoorsman yet, but I am between an indoorsman and outdoorsman. I'm working more that direction. The Konings have done a good job of trying to get me to do more camping and outdoor
Get an RV.
stuff. Yeah,
get an RV. It's a good middle ground.
Yeah. But I mean, you're getting to experience, some of the theory that, oh yeah, I'll get to do all that. And you're going, no. I just I gotta get the tent set up so we can get some rest.
Yeah. Yeah. We went out on the lake. We were out on Dillon, and to get them in the boat, to stay in the boat, not capsize the boat, and not get completely doused with water at any given moment. I mean, that was another perfect example. It's like, Job, you got to paddle with me. Like you can do this, buddy. You can do this. No. Switch sides. Yeah. So but that's where, I think that's, kind of bringing it back around to what it looks like to be a dad. It really, being a parent is such a great lesson in patience and love and empathy. Job, it's so funny because, one of the things that I've learned, and these are such great expressions, not just the daily life, but the moments that are special moments that you're creating memories. But I didn't play, traditional team sports. The kids played baseball and baseball and soccer. And, he's already been a team athlete. The kid's got an incredible arm. And, it's funny because our personalities are similar, but, and I understand the importance of being physical with him, but it's so funny because I call him my spirit animal because of how similar we are in so many ways outside of just the athletics. But it's been fun working with him, and just playing with him in that regard. And I think that's what's forged our relationship. So there's, yes, there's all those tense moments, but then there's all these memories that you can create by just being with and just choosing to set aside the things to just be present.
Yeah. And as easy as it is with him, I know with the older boy, with Gideon, it's stretching you.
Oh
You know,
yeah.
and you're really having to learn and, and learn patience. And, and I imagine there has to be all these, well, when I'm a dad, I'm going to, and then all of
Yeah.
a sudden you're in the midst of, you're like, oh crap.
Yeah.
How do I really handle this,
Yeah.
situation? So what are you doing to navigate that and to really, cause you are unbelievably intentional and you're there. What are you doing with him where he's not your spirit animal, as
Yeah.
you said?
Yeah. It's interesting because the physical side of Job is so different than the intellectual side of Gideon. Gideon is a brilliant kid. He is an observer and he picks things up very quickly. And so really he is his mother's son. But personality wise, I think that he and I are actually a little closer. He wants to be a part. He wants to be engaged. He feels like he's missing out if he's not there, whereas Job is happy to be by himself. So I have to be much more intentional to identify with what he wants. And even though that might be uncomfortable, really engaging him at that level, and just recognize like they both have very tender hearts, but he's really sensitive, and it's neat to see that. I would say in a lot of ways he's very similar to Jacob in that regard. Just in how he connects with people, and he's very connected to his emotions, and it's easy to hurt his feelings, and that's good. You just be aware of it. And so I'm failing to connect a specific moment. I mean, I know when we were down in Waco and at the cousin's house, that day right before we got ready to go, he wanted to do this thing. So he created, it's almost like a game show where he wanted to interview us and ask us questions. And so, he had put together a number of different things that he wanted to do. So we went up in the loft and we went through this and
Right.
we played the game with him.
Okay.
And that's the most recent thing that, very clearly comes to mind. And the opportunity to step into that allows him to feel important, and it allows him to feel heard. A lot of times the younger one gets heard just out of, screaming and yelling.
Volume.
Volume and the attention looks different.
Right.
Whereas the older one, you just have to treat him a little bit differently, And so that to think of a specific event, that's the first thing that comes to mind.
Well, I don't remember if I shared it on the podcast or not, but when Jacob and I met 9 years ago, it was a pretty unique situation where I ended up meeting him. Gretchen was in Michigan, and there was a lot of emotion that was attached there, and there was no class, no experience, no counsel that had prepared me for the one question that he asked me. The first 30 minutes of our meeting, relationship, which was, are you my new dad?
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering because I know, Gideon asked something about, you guys getting married. And I just like, how do you have that conversation? How do you, I mean, did you guys always initiate it? Did they? I mean, kids are really smart, Are they kind of going, y'all get married? What's going on here?
Yeah. It's come up in a number of different ways. We've let them process through it. We've never hidden anything from them, and we've talked very openly about it. One of the things that, her and her ex-husband had agreed on is that, there wouldn't be any guys staying in the house, so we've protected that and honored that. And so, there's been times when they don't understand the framework for that, and they're like, well, how come Josh isn't staying? And so there's been conversations that we've had about that, we're not married yet, and so you don't need to go into a lot of detail there, but they just understand that at a basic level. So there's been, a handful of conversations like that, but more recently, like Job, the younger one, he's still trying to put together the role that I play, because there's dad, but then there's Josh. And so, one of the questions he asked not too long ago is, when is Josh going to stay here for good? And so that's the closest to the question that really Jacob asked, I would say. It's been really neat to see, because Gideon, there's been a little bit of a tension between Gideon and I, the older one, simply because, personality wise, he 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 needs nurturing. And so the roughhousing that I might do with Job, he doesn't necessarily resonate with. And so there's that natural little bit of a tension between he and I that I recognize. And it's like, okay, how do I bridge this? How am I sensitive to it? And so just recently, I don't remember exactly how it came up, but Crystal was in a conversation with her friend Alicia, and Gideon was sitting there, and they somehow it came up. Basically, it was like, we love Joshua, and Gideon, and it's, to my knowledge, it's the first time he said it. He goes, "Yeah, I really love Josh," and I mean, you talk about a fast track to getting emotional.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's been it's such a huge blessing to, and I'm careful to use that word, but there's so many emotions, and there's so much that's tied to that. And I think the one message that I would communicate through this whole thing is, and I made notes about this, but just the importance of protecting not just her heart, but those kids' hearts, because the further down that road you go, the more difficult it's going to be, one, to disentangle their hearts. And so you really have to be cognizant about that. And I think as a man, as a real man, I'll preface it with that, as a real man, it is our role to be aware of that. Now, you can't know what the future is going to hold, but they don't need one more guy, and there's plenty of women out there that have been in multiple relationships. They may even have multiple fathers to their children. And to have one more guy come into their world and rip away, it just creates one more scar and one more set of collateral damage that doesn't need to be there. And I think for me, because of my past, but also just watching what a good father and the role that he plays, that for me has really been so important. And so I've wanted to be sensitive not only to her, but to them. And now that the fruit of that is starting to come forward, because we've cultivated such a healthy relationship, and we've had a number of, really arguments, but conversations with intensity at times. And we don't hide that from them, because they need to see, how do you resolve conflict? What does conflict look like? Like, mom and dad are going to fight, and when they do, how do they resolve it?
Yeah.
And seeing that come full circle. And I know Greg, between Chris Royce and Greg Gunn, both of those conversations, there was a little element of that. And I resonated with that, because I didn't have a mom and a dad. I just had mom, and it was just ugly at times, so to be able to paint that backdrop for the boys, I think is so good.
Well, and I would say this, as much as, you are very conscious of protecting Crystal's heart and the boy's heart, that only happens because of the work that you've done prior to this relationship, and learning how to, navigate your own shit that you've been through.
Yeah.
Having those conversations, those tough conversations with other men. You mentioned Band of Brothers, as an event that we've done with John Eldridge, I don't know, for the last 10 years or however long it's been quite a while. But, you've gone to those events, not married, you've gone to them married, you've gone to them divorced, you've gone to them, at the beginning of this relationship, really. I think it's gonna be interesting when you go. Hopefully COVID will dismantle and we'll get back to some life as normal, be able to have it next year, where you'll be able to go, now in a new relationship and being a father. But I would encourage guys that are in a similar thing. I think it's incredibly noble, and it's incredibly important to be looking out for the health, mental, emotional, spiritual health of the single mom's kids. But you can't do that if you're personally drowning.
Yeah.
You can't do that if you don't have your own band of brothers and you haven't worked through your own stuff, because it's, what the old saying, man, you're so worried about the speck in someone else's eye that you miss the plank in your own. If you haven't, what you've done such a marvelous job over the years of dealing with your own stuff and having self-awareness to then be able to go, I am aware, and I know some of the things that will trigger me. I know some of the things that will, get me off course. So I just have a last couple questions. This was a little conversation that you and I had, and Crystal now has been a mom for over 9 years. These are her kids, her biological kids. I mean, she's been with them day in and day out, and so she has a parenting style. You have been, to steal Stephen's word, perseverating on what it will be like to be a father for longer than that even. And so you have a style that you're working on. And we had a conversation, and you're saying, I'm wondering how I'm going to fit into this, and I told you, I said, she has her style, you're going to have your style, and then y'all going to have to come up with a style together, and navigating that and really beginning to understand that the relationship that you guys will have, you and Crystal will have with the boys, is going to be different. Hopefully it'll be better, but it'll be different than what it's been in the past, and it is going to be a natural evolution. And so talk for just a minute just about some of those conversations you're having. And sometimes it's hard because you'll see, maybe there's a way that she handles the situation and go, that's not the way I want to handle it. And as you guys have talked about, I know there's been a few times you've been like, you've gone back and had a conversation with her and said, this is why I'm doing this. And it maybe kind of rubs her for wrong at the beginning, but then she understands it as well. And just having that open dialogue.
Yeah. I'm trying to think
that was
of
a
this
run-on sentence right there. It was about 3 paragraphs worth of stuff that I asked in one supposed question, but yeah.
Well, and I'm trying to think of the specific circumstance you're thinking of as the example, but if you think of it, let me know.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Gideon and Bentley had a little confrontation, that little tension. Okay. And I think there's one way that Crystal handled it. I think there might've been a different way that you handled it, but you do a good job of stepping back and letting her do her thing. But you're now learning to go, when can I step in and have a voice here as well?
The beauty of who she is she knows how to navigate relationships really well. Mm-hmm. And so, studying, childhood development, studying the importance of interrupting patterns, having gone through her own counseling from her own past, it's allowed her to recognize how to navigate some of that stuff. Going back to, what you were talking about, it's been interesting because where I'm thinking of a handful of different events. So one of the things, as you know, I like to do is create memories. And so one of the things that I wanted to do for the boys, and one of their gifts for Christmas was a day trip to the Dallas World Aquarium. And so, just because of how this year has played out, the first time it kind of fell through, we ran out of time, and just how that particular visit to Dallas went, it didn't work out. And then the next time it didn't work out. And then the next time I was like, we really need to make this happen. And it's down to the wire, and the day is starting to click away, and she's like, we need to carve out more time for this. And I was like, we need to go. We told the boys we were going to go. And some of the greatest wounds that I have as a child are when my mom said she was going to do something, and then she didn't follow through on it. And she did not want to go.
Yeah.
And we went. And as a result, she was like, today was so much fun, and it was such a great opportunity. And for the boys, it's an adventure.
Yep.
And that for me, it's, one of the visions that I have, I think I might have shared this with you, is I want to have a vehicle with that. The boys know that when we're getting into that vehicle, we're going on an adventure. And so they know what that looks like. So I've been looking at these Lexus GX 470s because I don't care. I care somewhat, but about the mileage on it, I want to convert it into the adventure vehicle. It's going to get lifted. It's going to get big tires. It's going to have a rack on top, et cetera, et cetera. So I've been scouting that. But in the meantime, I look at these different examples, and I think where when it comes to parenting her boys, when it comes to disciplining, specifically right now, the conversation that we've had over and over and over is don't be the one to discipline. Let me do that. You build trust with them. right now.
Mhm.
And so where, actually I just thought of a good one. So Job does not know how to articulate his feelings. He knows how to act out. And so I don't know what the circumstance was, but it was the end of the day. And if he's hungry, you know it. And if he's tired, you know it.
Right.
End of story.
Yep.
And one of those two things, or a combination of those things, was happening. And she needed to go take care of whatever was going on. And he is screaming bloody murder. And I'm sitting in the kitchen and I'm like, I just want to I want to do something. I want to say something because this is unacceptable behavior. And I can't.
Mhm.
And I know I can't. And I know it won't be good for me to step in. And so I just sit there. And finally she comes back out and I said, hey, can I talk to you for a second? And I set her down and I said, it's really, really hard for me to listen to what was just going on in there. Because one, I don't feel like they're respecting you. And two, for me, I want to step in and support you. And it triggered some things for me from my past. And I shared that with her. And it was just a quiet conversation that we had. And for her, it gave her the space to know, okay, Josh cares. Josh is aware. He's wanting to protect not just me, but he also wants the boys to respond and respect me. And so that was a really good example of that, where I just have to defer to her because we don't have there's not enough track record there, and I'm not their father, so I can't play that role. But they know that I'm not going to let anything get by. And so, if she says something once or twice and they keep going, I step in, I say something.
Mhm.
So I play the assistant coach.
Okay.
That's what I play. On the back end of that, though, there's been a number of situations, kind of like the aquarium or even going camping, where, I've told her over and over and over, and it's not like I'm telling you, it's just, we're talking through it, and she understands that the role that I play is to really create experiences for the boys and yes, I'm developing trust, but as we know, men develop relationships by going and doing things. And so going camping really was the opportunity for her to see the boys come alive in a way. And even for
That's good.
herself, she said, I didn't realize how much I needed to get out. And so it was, shameless plug for moving back to Colorado or staying in Colorado. But, that was really, really a great opportunity for her to see the things that I've shared with her really come full circle. And
Yeah.
so there's been a plenty of those, but yeah.
Well, there's no doubt that building trust in a relationship is so foundational, and honor those promises that you make. And, just like, in a lot of ways, there's a lot of parallels between the journey that you're taking and, Gretchen and I adopting two boys, and understand that, how you will discipline children, it takes some time, and it takes some intentionality. And there are some things that maybe the way I was disciplined as a child that, I go, well, this is the way I'm going to do it, and I'm going to whoop that ass, and, it's my duty to spank that booty. that's, that doesn't, y'all don't do that. Okay. But
She does.
Okay.
I don't.
But that's not really where you can start,
Right.
and it took some time to be able to get there. And, so great. I love the analogy that you used about being, the assistant coach. That just, rings, in my world, and just very, very powerful. I want to shift gears just a little bit because we're almost out of time here. I want to talk a little bit about meat candy, because I know this is something, you have a huge affinity and love affair with cooking, and are an amazing cook. You've done, so many events for us and our family, and been a part of our family for so long, and taking care of so much of the cooking. Talk to us a little bit about, you started this little adventure. It was just a little thing of love that is, turned into a little something where you're doing some catering also on the side. And, you got your main business in finance, and, we're not going to talk about that, but you love doing this. And so it's been fun. And so talk to us a little about meat candy and what it's been like just to, be able to express your heart in that way.
Yeah. Well, the irony is I think I was 21 or 22 initially, when I said I will never own a restaurant.
Okay.
I watched one of the executives from Brinker partner with an executive chef opening a really nice restaurant in Dallas. And I was close enough to see the collateral damage of the restaurant industry in their respective lives and ultimately the ending of their marriages. And I just saw how heartbroken the executive chef was. And so ironically, I never thought I would be here. Crystal and her good friend Alicia, they both have talked about having a restaurant. They're like, well, but we want you to do the meat. You got to smoke the meat. I'm like, okay. All right. So long story short, I mean, really what it was I saw where for so long it was just being a part of the team. And just, this is one of the areas that I can deliver value on as a part of the team. But over time, there comes a point where it's like, hey, I'm giving my time away and our time is valuable. And so I just recognize that if I'm going to do this, I need to, charge for it. Otherwise I'm giving time away, and time is money. And so that's really what the impetus was. Our good friend Angela got married, and after a couple of conversations, I realized that there was no concept of like, hey, what should we do about the food for this wedding? And so I just stepped in and offered to help out with that. And their expectation was there was going to be 100 to 120 people there. So we prepared food for that. There's a lot of fun life hacks that you can learn on how to do a wedding on a budget. And so I shared a couple of those with her, which I think we originally started with that, and when I originally had gotten married. But really, Meat Candy has become, I love sharing the experience with people. Because we've done so much life together, there's a lot of things that I can point back to where I kind of chuckle about things. But I remember, you saying, what was the first thing that Jesus did after he was raised from the dead? He barbecued on the beach with his boys, and I just have to laugh because for me, I really do love the taste and the experience of being next to a grill and smoking some meat. And so it's just been fun to share that experience. I love tacos, and to be perfectly honest, I have yet to have tacos that are better than, I know it sounds arrogant, my brisket tacos are my favorite tacos.
I would agree.
So yeah, it's just been fun sharing that. And so it was never with the intent to start another business, but that's ultimately what it turned into. And then the sauce, the Meat Candy is really the namesake, because it's one of a kind. So
it's the secret sauce.
Yeah.
That it goes great on, I love it on the brisket, but it probably go good on a lot of different things. So.
Tons. Yeah.
Hey, Josh, if people want to connect with you, if they want to just, check out what you're doing, Instagram, all that stuff, we'll have the show notes as well, but just give us a little plug there as well.
Yeah. So on Facebook, you can find me under my first and my middle name, so Joshua Michael. And then on Instagram, I'm working on doing some rebranding. If they want to find Meat Candy, that's probably the best places on Instagram under Meat Candy Barbecue. And it'll be black and yellow. There's another company in Australia that has the name as well, but nothing in the US. And then it's Ambrands is my personal so AMBRANDS, or just look up Joshua Michael there as well. But that's the easiest way to find me. If you want to ping me there, if you want a recipe, I'm happy to share. I don't have any secrets there. How you make the sauce is the secret.
That is the secret.
But what's in the sauce is no secret. So if you can figure that out, then it's all yours. But happy to connect with people. And if they've got questions for me or whatever, I'm happy to answer those.
Well, I love it. I mean, hopefully by the time this airs, it will be officially engaged. The ring will be in and everything. And hopefully she'll say yes.
I'm fairly confident that'll be the case.
All right.
99.99.
Yeah. You got good commitments on the front end.
Yep.
Okay. Confirm the commitments.
Yep.
Close, get the check, get the referrals.
Yep.
Get out of there. Okay.
Yep.
So very good. Hey guys, thank you so much for listening. Man, I tell you what, hey, brand new website is up and active for us. It is BadAssDads.org. We finally got the URL for that. So very excited, BadAssDads.org. Check us out on Instagram. I'm doing a much better job at Badass Dads Podcast. So you can follow us there, hit us up with a message. We're doing some stuff, giving away t-shirts there as well. So if you hit us back, subscribe, leave us a review on, if you do it on iTunes or however you do it on the Android stuff or Stitcher or wherever you get it, that would be great. And check us out on YouTube, man. We're really excited. We want to grow our YouTube channel as well. You can just, Badass Dads there on YouTube. And so if you want to check out what we're doing and what we're talking about, and you can see Baby Yoda next to us here in the Iron Yeti studio. So, hey, guys, have a badass day. Be a badass dad. And we are out. Wait. Steven, stop the music. Okay, if you listen this far, give me 87 more seconds. All I want you to do is please subscribe, leave us a review, leave us a 5-star rating. Do that now. If you listen this far, just go ahead and leave us that quick review. Also, go to the Instagram. Follow us on the Instagram, the Badass Dads Podcast there. Go on Facebook. You can follow us there. Go to our website, BadAssDads.org. Register there. You can get all the up-to-date, everything from behind the scenes. Get the stuff. You can also find some swag t-shirts and hats and mugs and different things, notebooks there. So please, you listen to this far, give us a few more seconds. Have a badass day.